Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today, well, I'm not really sure what we're going to talk about just yet. Being that it is the off season, there's a lot of different topics to discuss, and there's a lot of time to discuss them. So, the quarterback situation is going to continue to be a primary talking point. I expect that to come up hundreds and thousands of times throughout the offseason here. So we'll try to lay low on that to a degree here, just, because it is so, we got to try to adapt on the fly, and right now it's probably not the best time to talk about the quarterback situation. I think that kind of the main talking point here is, again, what the Vikings are looking like heading towards the future. And, the season is over now. It's unfortunate, but we got to move past that. And we can look forward to a bright future now and this is important for fans to remember, that the Vikings are still set up for success. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means for this team, and that's kind of I guess the theme of this particular show. So we'll talk about that. No sponsors for today, so let's just jump right into it with a little talk about the offensive coordinator spot and kind of what we've been seeing from the Vikings in terms of the guys that they have interviewed, the guys that you like, Drew, and the guys that I guess you don't like.
Yeah, it looks like Mike McCoy is one of the initial reported people that was interested in the job, and the Vikings seem to be interested. But he has, I believe, already signed with Arizona. Mm-hmm. So Ben McAdoo is another name thrown around. Darrell Bevell, actually, I believe, is going to interview with the Vikings. Former Seattle offensive coordinator. I think he's still with Seattle. He might still be with Seattle technically. He was with Minnesota during the Brett Favre years there. Sean Ryan, QB coach from Houston. He obviously kind of is
that one.
Big part of Deshaun Watson's rookie season, and then also won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants with the Eli Manning era there, from 2007 and 2011. And then Dan Campbell, a tight ends coach for the Saints, is also in the mix here. So I really like. Honestly, I like Kevin Stefanski because he has so much experience with Minnesota, and he can bring a mix of a lot of different offenses that he's worked with in the past. So I really like that option, and I think the most recent example with working with Shermer and being able to, he understand just being in house. The team philosophy, the team mindset. Right. You understand what your head coach Mike Zimmer would want in a quarterback. I like him as the best option, I think. But then I think Sean Ryan too is another excellent candidate there. If you can keep a combination of Ryan and Stefanski, I think that'd be awesome. I think Ryan both those guys, not been offensive coordinators yet, but I think they both deserve their shot. And so either one of them would be excellent in my opinion.
Well, I like the Sean Ryan idea that you just brought up here, because Sean Ryan is the same guy, I believe, that worked with Tom Savage and Case Keenum down in Houston. And that means that he worked under Bill O'Brien, and Bill O'Brien is a fantastic head coach as far as I'm concerned. Keep in mind that he's the guy that worked under Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. Yep. He was out in Penn State, and he was a big piece of kind of the rebuilding process after that whole scandal in Penn State.
The news.
That news.
Yes.
And so, I really like what kind of that coaching tree has been able to accomplish so far. So I would be interested in looking at both Sean Ryan and Tom Savage. As I've mentioned in the last couple shows, I like to keep this as consistent as possible. So I did really like Mike McCoy, but it sounds like he had other ideas. He wanted to go down to Arizona, and to a degree, I don't blame him. That's a very good situation down there. With Bruce Arians leaving, that is to a degree disappointing, and should be disappointing for Cardinals fans. But they have a lot of good pieces, and they have a lot of, time, I suppose, to rebuild this team, and they got a good guy to do it in Mike McCoy. So now we shift over to what Vikings fans and what the Vikings team want to do. And I think you brought up a great point there with both Darrell Bevell and Kevin Stefanski. So Bevell being the guy that was with the Seattle Seahawks during that whole situation, won a Super Bowl, of course, but then you have the Malcolm Butler interception. Which is
I think he's given a pretty bad, somewhat deservingly, but
right.
That's kind of been the biggest mark on his career, I think, as an offensive coordinator, which it is one play, but come on, run the ball. But
yeah. It's not great PR, right?
No.
That leaves us with Kevin Stefanski, who, I still don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, by the way.
I don't either. Yeah, it's probably we're probably butchering that completely. Which actually, that kind of like makes me think about how many times we have been just saying somebody's name completely wrong, and then eventually we're just like, we either phase out or we stop saying that person's name. But Stefanski, it could be Stefanski, it could be Stefanski. I don't know. If someone can correct me or us, that'd be awesome. But as far as I know, it's Stefanski, and we're going to say that until we're corrected, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this guy then. For the most part, I feel like Vikings fans are fairly educated when it comes to what's going on within their team organization. Like I said, the team does a great job simply putting out information for everyone to read, and if you want to, it's right in front of your face. So that's really nice. And but I do think it's also important to kind of toss out your own opinion on the matter. And so Stefanski is a guy that I personally really like. You look at what he has been able to accomplish thus far and what he's kind of on the road to doing. Being under Pat Shurmur is great. That's really nice to see. And he has the potential to kind of build on what Shurmur was able to accomplish in a relatively short amount of time. The one fear I do have here is that the Vikings have now bounced to now their third offensive coordinator in as many years. Right, I believe that's correct, and so you start to wonder if they can continue to build up these pieces as they go, continue to build on and create something special with so many different moving parts. But at the same time, Stefanski's been in this organization for 12 years, so I think that you have to look at him as probably a primary candidate for the job.
Right. I mean, if you're the longest tenured coach on the staff, I think that brings an extra level of comfort and experience that you won't have with another out-of-house guy. I mean, he was here when Bevel was here the first time, so he can maybe understand some of the things Bevel could have done better with that team, and then apply that to the roster that the Vikings have now. And I also think he probably understands. This is also important too, is that he understands probably what the Vikings want in a quarterback, not just an offensive coordinator, because part of the Vikings process of choosing a quarterback is going to be based on what the offensive coordinator prefers, the system that he runs. I think that's why I think Stefanski is probably the best option to me, just to promote the guy in house. He's been working with the same offensive weapons now. I mean, he worked with the tight ends. Kyle Rudolph, he was a tight ends coach a few years ago. He worked with the running backs last year, so he knows Jerick McKinnon. He knows C.J. Ham now. He knows how to work with a lot of these guys. And then obviously he's aware of the threat that Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen are on the outside. So I just think you bring the guy in who has experience already for several years now working with the same weapons on the outside, the skill position players the Vikings already have on the roster. And then if you can keep Stefanski on as a QB coach and also bring in Sean Ryan, I think that would be optimal. But I think the safest and most likely, realistic, option would be to promote Stefanski to offensive coordinator, and then go from there, because I think he definitely has earned a shot to be.
Yeah. So, and I largely agree to it, like with your point here, but I kind of want to move back here to, again, what the philosophy behind promoting a coach from within as opposed to hiring someone from from outside, excuse me. So from my vantage point, and this is my opinion here, don't take it too seriously, is that, when you promote from within, you're building on a trend, right? You're trying to continue what's going on and what's working. And so this kind of is dependent on what you think about how the Vikings offense was last season. If you believe that Pat Shurmur did a good job, I think that it's important to look at Kevin Stefanski as a very realistic candidate here, because he has been with the organization for 12 years. Now, at the same time, if you think that the Vikings offense was abysmal, I suppose, because of what happened in the NFC Championship game and ultimately what happened to this team, then maybe you like Darrell Bevell a little bit more, just because you're bringing in new ideas once again. And Darrell Bevell, coming from Seattle, is a guy that has a ton of talent and has proven, both with the Vikings organization and the Seahawks organization, that he is a very talented offensive coordinator. So, in my mind, with Mike McCoy now off the board, you look at these two candidates and it becomes kind of a pick your poison type thing. And to me, Kevin Stefanski is probably the better option.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and again, we both respect the work that Darrell Bevell has done. We both respect Sean Ryan and what he's been able to do. And then, Ben McAdoo too, and what he did in Green Bay too before going to the Giants, I think also is kind of flying under the radar right now. His experience in Green Bay was, phenomenal, working with Rodgers and,
right.
Improving him and making him kind of what he is with McCarthy there. We both don't necessarily think McCarthy is the most elite head coach, maybe, at least I don't. But I think, a lot of what he's done has helped Aaron Rodgers become the quarterback he is. So,
sure.
Sure. I think you have some solid candidates here. And I think, obviously, living up to what Pat Shurmur kind of that level he left Minnesota, that's going to be tough to do. But you have the right pieces around. You can you enter the situation. You get to pick your quarterback, essentially. So I think this is a very coveted position. So I would assume these are the best of the best candidates out there just because of, it's a great situation for an offensive coordinator to either A, get a start in, or B, if you're Darrell Bevell, kind of, get another chance to prove yourself.
Right.
I guess same thing with Ben McAdoo as well. So, again, I think a lot of these candidates are very, very good and very proven and well respected around the league. So, it's going to work out well, I think. We might not get the Pat Shurmur innovation or the third down success that we had last year. I think the Vikings were third in the NFL in third down rate, but you got the talent, you have the weapons, you have an offensive line that's vastly improved. You get to pick your quarterback. It's a very good situation.
Absolutely, and this is something that I talked a little bit about on the Football Machine show last week. The idea of Minnesota becoming a very good destination for both free agents and draft picks, right? So,
yeah.
The draft is a little bit different in the sense that when you're drafted, that's where you're going. I know that guys like Eli Manning have kind of finessed the system in the past, but when you get drafted, you should be excited to go to that team, or you should at least pretend to be excited because you don't really know what's coming for you. And that's kind of the one message I would give to kids that are looking to get drafted out there is that it doesn't necessarily matter where you start; it's more about where you finish. But the point being here is that free agents are probably looking at Minnesota now as the place because you've got this beautiful stadium, right? Like, absolutely phenomenal stadium. There's no way around it. I'm not going to listen to arguments on the stadium. That's just absolute trash. And now you have a head coach and hopefully a good offensive coordinator coming in who understand, a winning philosophy and kind of what they need to do in order to capture this elusive championship. And to me, that is all you really need if you're a free agent. Like, yes, you probably want the money. The money is important. Don't get me wrong. It's important, but it's not happiness, right? And if you want to be a champion, the Vikings have set the precedent now that you can come to Minnesota and potentially become a champion based off of what we have seen from this organization thus far.
Right. I mean, this is actually my skull scale for this week, the final kind of season wrap-up one I just published on VikingsTerritory.com. I touched on the winning foundation that Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman have built here. It starts with, and I led with the example of how big-time players make big-time plays, and the Vikings have that all over the roster. You have Harrison Smith, I think that Week 5 interception against Chicago where he essentially won that game for the Vikings. I mean, the Bears had a chance to go on the field and win the game with a field goal. Smith picks off a Trubisky pass, and they just kick a game-winning chip shot. And you have all these examples. I mean, the Rhodes interception on Thanksgiving. You have the Anthony Harris fumble against the Rams. You have the Adam Thielen slant route on a late third down in a game and against the Falcons. All these examples of obviously, and you can probably count the Minneapolis Miracle too. I'm sure that qualifies as a big-time play. Yeah. But the point is that the Vikings have so many talented and big-time players on this roster that have proven over and over that they will make the big plays when they're needed. And now it's just time for a few holes to be filled in. You need a quarterback, obviously. There's a bunch of really good options out there. You have an offensive coordinator and you need an offensive coordinator. A lot of really good candidates here. I mean, this team, thanks to Spielman and Zimmer, is built for success in the future. clearly. You don't go 13-3 with a bunch of rather young player. I mean, these guys are all just reaching their peak right now in their careers. You don't have that successful of a season without having some sort of winning foundation built already. So I think, again, like you said, it's a very good destination for an offensive coordinator to either, again, revamp his career or kind of get that first shot as a coordinator instead of a position coach. So I think the Vikings they're going to get a really good guy, I think, with this job.
So I like this theme of Minnesota becoming a great destination for free agents and for players and for coaches to a degree as well. I do think that this is kind of this is a theme that has worked in other cities as well. A winning culture changes a lot of things. You could see it happen almost overnight. I mean, this has definitely been a process since Mike Zimmer was hired in 2014, but at this point right now, you look at all of the moving parts in Minnesota, and yeah, they have that's, I guess, scary to a degree when you don't necessarily know who your quarterback is going to be next season. But at the same time, it also gives the Vikings a lot of room for error, right? Because if you want, you can pick from one of these three quarterbacks. I don't care who your favorite one is. I think I've made my point pretty clear on who I think the guy should be, and I do really like the attractive free agents on the open market as well. But the point is that Rob Brzezinski has a ton of room to do whatever he really wants and whatever the team wants. And
I should give him a lot of credit too, by the way. I should have.
For sure.
He and Spielman and Zimmer, all three of them, really have all done equal part, I think, in building this winning foundation, I guess.
Yeah. So, it's a great situation, and it's something that you can build on, and ultimately that's all you can really ask for. Fans love to throw temper tantrums over whatever it is, but you got to be realistic about the process. And the process here is that the Vikings are getting better. And yes, they didn't win the NFC Championship game. And yes, I know everyone is saying they're over it, but let's be real. You're never going to get over that moment just because they got blown out again. And it's important to kind of look at that moment and put that on your checklist, right? As just another moment where the Vikings blew it. And if that's truly the case, no pun intended, then
there it is.
You got to move forward with a championship mindset and believe that this team can accomplish something special with the pieces that are already in place and hopefully with the pieces that are coming to this organization sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so I think that's a great kind of segue into our Twitter question segment here.
Let's do that.
Again, we're gonna keep these immediately following the season shows relatively short, just because there's no actual football to talk about right now.
Right.
But I got an email question here from Brian Wilson. He kind of gave us 3 different scenarios for the quarterback position. So the first one, trying to get Alex Smith. That was a name we didn't really mention last show. And then from there, asking Teddy to take a 2-year deal as a backup, or can sign Teddy to a 1-year deal and then try and get McCarron or Landry Jones as kind of a insurance plan as a backup, or compete for the starting job even. Or your last scenario here would be just to go all after Cousins. Hopefully not too expensive of a deal, but then continue to develop Slaughter as the backup. So what do you think of those 3 options? Alex Smith as your starter?
Nope.
No Alex Smith. You're not on it.
I'm not an Alex Smith guy. That's just not who I am.
Deal?
I'm not a fan of Alex Smith. That's just
really okay.
Yeah,
I personally think he's better than Kirk Cousins, but
I mean, that's your opinion.
That is my opinion, and I could clearly by the look in your face there, and I said that you don't agree with it. But,
I do not.
But the next option then, what he said, was Teddy on a 1-year deal, and then getting an insurance plan like A.J. McCarron or Landry Jones to back him up, or compete with him for a starting job. I don't know how you feel about that one.
See, I like Teddy Bridgewater. I believe that he has the talent to do some special things in this league. But there are some question marks surrounding his health still. There are some question marks surrounding a lot of different things. So I trust Teddy Bridgewater. I trust the Vikings to kind of figure out what works best for him. But that remains to be seen. So what I like about this specific scenario is that A.J. McCarron is a beast. He's a championship caliber player. That's a good person to bring into the locker room just from the perspective that he has won championships before down in Alabama. He's been thrust into the spotlight in Cincinnati a couple of times and been,
Yeah.
able to accomplish some very special things, I think, he's the guy. This is a guy that they considered replacing Andy Dalton with, despite.
Well, in Cleveland, I mean, it's Cleveland, but they were going to trade, I believe, a first rounder for A.J. McCarron this year, and they had it all finalized and everything. And then I think it was the Browns that actually didn't get the paperwork in time or something like that. But point is, he's well respected around the league,
Right.
And I think he's probably a starting caliber player, just kind of waiting for his chance there behind Andy Dalton. But
I like that option.
Yeah, the last one here was Cousins on the big deal, and then kind of having Slaughter as the backup. So out of those three, you have, again, Alex Smith, you have Teddy, then with McCarron or Landry Jones, and you have Kirk Cousins and Slaughter. What's your favorite of those three options?
Well, I like Kyle Slaughter too. I've talked about this, that he has a lot of potential from what we've heard and what we've seen and what we've read about this guy. And so I do like, all three of these scenarios have their own good or positive and negative, I suppose. It sort of depends on how you look at it. And when you look at this final scenario with Kyle Slaughter and Kirk Cousins, that's sort of a win now situation, I think. Yeah. It gives the Vikings the capacity to win immediately while also developing a player for the future. And it comes down to, do you believe in Kyle Slaughter based off what has been seen on his
small
Denver
sample
film.
size.
Small sample size. So I like this scenario as well because I love the Kirk Cousins mentality. The gunslinger mentality can be a lot of fun.
Case Keenum was a lot of fun this year. I kind of, if I'm going to power rank right now, my dream QB options, I guess I would say, that are realistic anyway, I would say by, looking at what it's going to cost, I'm going to say Teddy's one just because of how cheap that would be and where you could allocate money elsewhere. Yeah. But then I think I'd go Alex Smith number two. I think he's underrated. I think he's got some serious arm talent. This year he showed he can throw the deep ball. And I think he was limited down the stretch and kind of what the Kansas City offense was trying to do. They limited Kareem Hunt a little bit. They trying to force feed him instead of really working things outside and balancing things. But from there, then I think I go with one of the Bradford Keenum options and then Cousins on a big deal. But these are all really good scenarios that I think the Vikings can win with all three of them. So that was kudos to Brian Wilson for that question, because I think the Vikings could legitimately win with either of those scenarios. Our last question here we'll take from ZenCupid at ZenCupid on Twitter. What are your thoughts on draft offseason priorities right now? He sees it as number 1, offensive guard, 2, defensive tackle, 3, tight end, 4, cornerback or defensive back, 5, and then guard again. So how do you feel, kind of, what are your initial top needs for the Vikings?
Well, this is difficult because, again, we're very early in the offseason, right? And I need to make that message clear before I answer this. But it's important, I think, for everyone to understand that until the final pieces are in place, that means the offensive coordinator and kind of what the philosophy, I suppose, is going to be moving forward. That's important to know first, I think. So right now, I look at the offensive line as somewhat of an issue. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's offensive tackle or offensive guard. I do think that they have a future center in Pat Elflein for sure. I'm not going to fight anyone on that. It's just a matter of maybe they want to move him to a guard spot. I don't know about that. So offensive line has to be a priority. And that just is dependent on if you want to run more 5- and 7-step drops, I think. And then, if a cornerback should also be a priority as well because of how important it is within the Vikings system. And we don't know what's going to happen with Trey Waynes yet or with Terrence Newman. So with those two guys' careers somewhat up in the air, or not careers, career in the sense with Terrence Newman because he might retire, but Trey Waynes may go somewhere else, something like that. It is important, I think, to look at guys like Josh Jackson from Iowa, was someone that has been a theme throughout the offseason because I think he runs press very well and would fit the Vikings system. But then you got to also look at wide receivers because the Vikings have so much talent on that roster, and we don't know what's going to happen after the Minneapolis Miracle with Stephon Diggs' contract. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen with, Adam Thielen could make a lot of money too. He's just simply under contract right now. So it's an immediate future versus a future. if that makes sense.
The future. Yeah, I mean the future technically is like in 5 minutes. I mean that's the future, but also the future is like in 2 years. so I mean that does make total sense. I do think offensive line in general is probably a need, probably the top need, just because I think Joe Burge retiring is big. I think down the stretch, I guess you can afford to have some developmental tackles behind Remmers and Reef.
Right.
They're not the youngest guys in the NFL. Reef is somewhat inexperienced, but Remmers has been around for a while. You can always afford to add another developmental guy, or even have some depth for Rashad Hill. And then obviously at guard too, I think there's room for improvement. With whether it be Easton or whether it be Berger. And I think tight end too, especially now. This might be a biased take, but South Dakota State tight end Dallas Goedert is like my dream first round pick. Because he's...
Whoa. Can we back this up real quick? Is this because he looks like Jim Kleinsasser?
It's not because Goddard actually he blocks like Jim Kleinsasser, but he catches passes like Rob Gronkowski-ish. Like it's like the best of both. Okay, not Rob Gronkowski, but he's a very, very
Travis
good dual
Kelce,
tight
maybe?
threat. Okay, he could be a Travis Kelce. I think Kelce was a mid-round pick, wasn't he? Something like that, Kelce. So Goddard could be something like that because as much as I love Jim Kleinsasser, I love him for the way he blocked and how gritty he was and how he did his job perfectly every time and never said a word about it. But his job was usually to block and not to receive. Goddard can do both, and that's why I like him because this isn't a knock on Kyle Rudolph. This isn't a knock on the tight ends currently on the roster. I just think Goddard's potential is unbelievable.
Right.
And from what I've seen at South Dakota State, he's been terrorizing the top teams in FCS for 3 years now. And so I like him. That's kind of why I have tight ends as a need, but it's not really a need. I just kind of have it up there because I like this guy a lot. I think
tight end is interesting. And
it is because David Morgan's not a bad player at all. And Kyle Rudolph's not a bad player at all either. He's in the Pro Bowl right now. So it's not really a need at all. It's just that I think you have room to, if you want to use two tight ends, that's more. Goddard would be an excellent player to plug in there with Rudolph, something like that.
So the question then becomes, is this a matter of finding a TE2 or a TE3? Because if you like Kyle Rudolph, and I personally do, I think that Kyle Rudolph has a lot of talent, and I think that he is very well-rounded in his craft. So he's an important piece, regardless of the fact that he's slow as hell. I'm not gonna fight with anyone on that. Takes the guy a little bit to get going. Let's put it that way. But David Morgan, David Morgan is very similar, but just because they're quote slow doesn't mean they're unathletic. They're also very talented. So I think it becomes a matter of what do you see from the third tight end spot then.
Here's what I'll say. I think a tight end trio of Rudolph, Morgan, and Goddard would be probably the best in the league. I will say that.
That's also the whitest tight end group of all time.
It would be. But hey, it would produce on the field, I think. So
I'm not going to deny that. I like this scenario. I just think that it's important to be realistic here and understand that the Vikings do have some power already at tight end, and
absolutely.
And maybe it's less important to get a TE3 as opposed to getting a CB2. Because again, let's just make this clear. I don't know if Waynes is going to ultimately return. I think he should, but he might have earned himself a good amount of money this year, and we just don't know that right now.
Waynes was the top man coverage corner in the league, I believe, in terms of pass rate.
Something like that. Yeah.
That nobody saw coming. But for my draft priorities or offseason needs, I think offensive line, particularly at guard, but also you can afford to have a developmental tackle. Guy to come in for Berger, you need a right guard, I think, to start. But then I think, after that, you can bring in Dallas Goedert. I love that guy. I've already said a lot about him. But then defensive back is obviously going to always be a need just because it's always nice to have cornerback depth. Saw that this year when Alexander and Newman both stepped in and made plays. But then, after that, I think, honestly, there's not a whole lot of holes, I guess. If you want to draft the quarterback to add to depends on who you pick up for your starting quarterback, but I would probably draft the quarterback as well. I don't think I would rather not have Slaughter be the immediate backup right now, but that's kind of up for interpretation right now. And again, this is super early, but these are kind of our initial, following the Eagles' loss, this is what we see for the roster. So
Right. So Unless we have any final social media thoughts or anything like that, any emails or anything we need to finish up real quick?
I do not have anything. One more point here, actually, from Scott Amundsen on our Twitter. He tweeted us and said, like, is there really a point debating the future quarterback before we've settled on an offensive coordinator? That's a good point, because I think
Right.
the offensive coordinator should have some say in as to what quarterback is brought in, or
I agree.
guess to start. So that's a good point there, and I think that's a good one to end on, because people are getting. I'm personally getting all caught up in the quarterback debate and who should come in and who should be avoided.
Right.
But I think it's important to realize that that's not going to happen without an offensive coordinator.
And that ultimately is, and this is probably a good concluding point here, since this is what we started with. It's called a callback for those who don't know. Kevin Stefanski.
Vocabulary.
Kevin Stefanski probably becomes the favorite if that is your line of thinking, right? If you do believe that this team is, moving in the right direction, it's a philosophy thing. If it's moving in the right direction, promote from within. And so that's probably a good point to conclude on, and good question as well to conclude on. So thanks as always, folks, for listening to the About the Labor podcast. We'll be back next week. I believe on Monday, and I don't know.
We could have a big Pro Bowl recap, the most meaningful game of the season. We'll big recap on how all the Vikings did. I'm sure it'll be awesome.
And maybe that's just what we'll do.
Hey, Kyle Rudolph was a Pro Bowl MVP once upon a time. So
hey, you never know.
Who knows?
You never know. So you can find the About the Labor podcast on Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. I don't know. Look for it on Castbox and YouTube. Those are the primary spots.
Search it on Google and you'll find it. Like the first 10 pages. Yeah.
Try that. Yeah. And then you can find my work, my written work on Zone Coverage. I'm on a little bit of a break right now, a little bit of vacation from writing, so you probably won't see anything from me for at least a week or two here. But make sure to check out VikingsTerritory.com for Drew's work. He's still working through his skull sealed, and that's been a great piece of work all year. So check out VikingsTerritory.com, ZoneCoverage.com. A lot of elite Vikings content going on with this team, heading in the right direction now. So. That's about all I've got. You can find us on Twitter, VikingsATL Pod. That's the best place to send us questions and thoughts and stuff like that if you do want to appear on the show. We love doing that. It makes our lives easier if you give us stuff to kick around. So please do so. Myself, Robert Reidell, Reidell. My guy here, Drew Mahowald, Mahowald. And, yeah, make sure to go down to Blackstack Brewing, Can, Wonderland, all those places that we've been talking about throughout the past. And we'll have another great show for you guys coming later on next week.